Okay, good morning everyone. I'm scripted, trying to be precise with time. Words, images combined. This presentation has two colliding parts. The first posits a theory, the second is practice-based. The subject of the research is the integration of text and image. My concern in this first part is prosaic, to theorize the graphic labor implicit in integrating text and image on sequences of pages of long-form content. This is about conventions of page layout and the factors which determine why, despite generations of automation, integrated arrangements of text and image remain relatively labor-intensive. The discussion is historically contingent on professional practices of page production. Scribes working with pen and ink, print workshops and factories doing modular typography in wood and metal, and networked digital typography with its capacity to abstract away technical dependencies. The two examples shown here sit at the poles of a broad historical sweep. In the first, on the left, text and image are frequently, organically and intricately combined and have relatable proportions. In the second, divisions of labor and mechanization have departmentalized text and image for practical and ultimately economical reasons. I've prepared images for this first part using indexed color spaces with the intention of illustrating and diagramming. The more graphically laborious a particular layout is in its original mode of production, the more colors are included in the index of its representation here. This device does not pretend to be exacting, but here, for example, left to right, a 16th century book in which images appear as separate plates, never on the same pages as the main text. A 16th century book which integrates text and image on pages, but does not semantically synchronize them. An 18th century book in which text and image are coordinated at the page level, and a 20th century book in which text and image are entwined down to the paragraph. The underlying historical dynamics don't proceed consistently toward integration. They would be better characterized as flip-flopping between phases of greater and lesser integration. I won't refine that point now, but I did cover that in the presentation that I did here last year. You can watch it on YouTube. An initial claim then. The more spatially and semantically integrated text and image, the more graphic labor is required to manage the complexity of their layout. I just described this 8th century manuscript as having frequent, organic and intricate combinations of text and image. Note how its illustrations are largest and most elaborate at the left edge of the text block, but can potentially appear at any point on a line. The distinction between text and illustration is soft. I should say that I'm using throughout this the word illustration. I think maybe it's technically more correct to say illumination or rubrication, but because I'm trying to establish this kind of distinction between text and image, where image can be the more graphically laborious feature of a page, I'm using illustration. On the line, third from the bottom here, text morphs into illustration. The scribe's concern is obviously to maintain an even line length, but the gradual nature of the slippage is telling. Illustrations inhabit text scenographically. Movement away from such conjoining of text and image is not simply a consequence of mechanization. In fact, the production of the scriptorium, the print workshop, and computerized typesetting have in common a departmentalization of text and image during the eras when they have been dominant means of production. Think about why Adobe InDesign, Illustrator, and Photoshop remain separate software products. This is a page from an unfinished 12th century manuscript at Hereford Cathedral. I'll show a number of examples from the library there, which I've recently had the chance to view in person. Notice on the verso page, the scribe responsible for the main text marked a space into which a second scribe was to have added illustration. The handoff is vague, a circle lightly drawn with a compass. In other cases, handoffs between scribes defined the precise scope of an illustration, such as this outline for an uppercase D on the recto. I don't intend to resolve confusion about whether illustrations had primarily textual or pictorial or decorative purposes. The point is that when different intensities and visualities of graphic labour met in medieval books, they tended to do so at specific positions on the page. The reasons for this are relatively easy to decipher here. Thanks, Joost, for this decipher word. I like that. Disregarding the surrounding marginalia shown in brown, imagine the first scribe proceeding steadily through the main text. Each stroke is performed with similar speed and intensity to maintain quality of line. Perhaps they slowed at the end of each line while deciding whether to break a word and how. Graphic labour is spread relatively evenly across these columns of text. The second scribe was responsible for these illustrated letters. It's probably not insightful to speculate on the comparative amounts of labour expended by the two scribes, but I will venture a second claim. Handoffs in the scriptorium caused the most intensive graphic labour to occur at the left edge of the text block, often at the start of a section. These spaces were easy for the scribe writing the main text to make allowances for, and gave the second scribe access to marginal space within which to elaborate their forms. At first, the advent of print preserved these spatial arrangements. Gutenberg experimented with printing headings and illustrations in a second ink in his Bible. The first 3 lines of the left column here were printed red before the page was illustrated by a scribe. For economical reasons, Gutenberg took to leaving an unprinted space for illustrations to be commissioned by the buyer of the book, as had been the manuscript tradition. Canonically, changes in page layout practices of course reflect the achievements of great protagonists. Thomas Bewick used the ends of hardwood blocks to make his engravings stiff enough to be placed in chases with metal type, enabling these integrated layouts to be printed in a single impression. Crucially, Bewick was the author and illustrator of this book, simplifying the coordination of text and image. He produced these smaller, more ambient illustrations to modulate space and keep the main texts and images synchronized. John Berger's Ways of Seeing, designed by Richard Hollis, is celebrated for its integration of text and image. Paragraphs end precisely at the bottoms of pages, and images are sized to maintain synchronization between content and page. A bold typeface mediates the optical density of text and image. I've coloured this to suggest how each successive integration of text and image compounds the complexity of the layout and increases the risk that changing it would be even more graphically laborious. It is significant that the mythology of this book is not about technological innovation. The book is mythologized for going against the prevailing economy of mainstream publishing by coordinating editorial and design roles. Without such close cooperation, these layouts would be impossible for a designer alone to produce in a project of this nature. Outside mainstream publishing, technological innovation does carry the narrative of a liberation of the means of production. The typewriter and the photocopier were the tools of independent publishing, and fandom is a genre in which we find aberrations of graphic labour. These are pages from a Star Trek fanzine. In The Cultural Economy of Fandom, John Fiske writes, "Fans produce and circulate among themselves texts which are often crafted with production values as high as any in the official culture. The key differences between the two are economic. Fans do not write or produce their texts for money. Indeed, their productivity typically costs them money." A fitting account of the graphic labour displayed on this page, in which lines of text are manually spaced to fit around the image. It will always be more laborious to entwine text and image like this, and here laboriousness has cultural resonance. An extreme piece of typographic fan art is Richard Hamilton's typo translation of Marcel Duchamp's handwritten notes. Hamilton first produced a letterpress edition. This image shows the extremely laborious cut and paste process of its preparation. Practically every line of text is styled differently, according to a complex scheme of references to the original notes. Later, Hamilton made another typo translation using Quark Express. Here I change colour each time the text deviates from a standard to show how laborious this process is compared to conventional, computerized typesetting, in which hundreds of linked text boxes can be manipulated as if they were a single typographic object. Concluding this first part, two summarizing statements. Graphically laborious integrations of text and image tend toward particular positions on the page. The left edge of the medieval text block, the vertical junctures between paragraphs in letterpress printing. And this primarily reflects divisions of labour and the coordination involved in handing off work between contributors. And technology is an accelerant. It quickens production, changing what is practicable for smaller and smaller groups of collaborators by enabling them to consolidate roles. But within a given technological means of production, scriptorium, print factory, one-person digital design studio, it remains more laborious to integrate text and image than to separate them. Okay, part two. With that, I hope to have set up a simplistic theory of graphic labour, which I will now collide with some contemporary AI discourse and a practice-based example. 2 years ago, this paper, Word as Image for Semantic Typography, was published. Its authors used generative AI to inflect the letter forms in any target word with visual features of the word's referent. Basically, it adds ears or leaves to a word that a user types and provides them with a PNG of the result. Or it did. Their code doesn't run anymore. This produced priceless and partisan Twitter reactions. Here, designer Eric Hu quotes an excitable technologist who has proclaimed it to be a huge upgrade for font design. Eric's second tweet at the bottom there is revealing. He writes, "The thing stopping me from making a C into the shape of a cat is not a lack of ability." If I understand Eric's rhetoric, he is identifying, and actually if you know how incredibly dexterous Eric's work is, this is obvious. He's identifying not a skill issue, but an issue of taste. Professional designers don't stylize words like this because it's punning and tasteless. The paper doesn't offer compelling use cases for this technique, but to be fair to the authors, the examples they show do conform to what we would call display typography. And I think that's why Eric's second tweet is so intriguing for me. Returning to this manuscript, we can see that a sharp distinction between display and text already exists. We know that the scribes who made these pages used what is called a matched hand. A lead scribe defined the forms and proportions of the letters, and the others learned to match them. Considerable effort went into establishing and maintaining the distinction between precisely these two forms of visuality. Looking back at these practices, it's obvious that typefaces, with their modular and repeatable forms, are the perfect labour-saving devices to quicken this work. If AI collapses the text-image distinction, will we still uphold this? So this is something that I'm working on at the moment. I was commissioned by a startup called Titles to create this art, which they use to train a generative AI model. Their platform is crypto media native, uses prompt models made by artists, and if the resulting creations are sold as NFTs or meme coins or whatever, the artists trustlessly receive a royalty. I made these in late 2023, around the time that the mainstream image generation models like Midjourney and DALL-E were beginning to noticeably professionalize their outputs. And these training images were meant to be on the cusp of text and image, and with their choppy and internally inconsistent compositions, I hoped the resulting model would have something of the garbled nature of early generative AI. This model is now used by many creators. In this Title Studio platform, you can you write prompts and you can sample several models at once. So people can generate images which have aspects of my model combined with other models. I'm just going to let it scroll until it gets to this cute little guy. For a book project of my own, partly inspired or traumatized by the Word as Image tool, I've been using the model to generate abstract word-like images. I create reference images to suggest the proportions of these forms, but generative AI, being a probabilistic temperamental technology, at least for now, the results are unpredictable. And together with a collaborator, Simon Knebel, we've developed a browser-based application which takes the basic shape of one of these generated images, defines a grid within it, and draws the vector points of typed glyphs constrained to that grid, enabling words to be typeset to fit the given shape. So this grid is derived from the black shape in the upper left corner, and that's derived from the generated image at the top left. And these vectors can then be manipulated with a set of parametric tools. I didn't have time to make a video of that, sorry. And this is very much work in progress, but the intention is to produce a book of several hundred pages with this combination of techniques. Each page will be a fully readable and unique text image, which uses AI as a labour-saving device for the generation of tens of thousands of unique assets, and yet is also extremely graphically laborious. Thank you very much.